Mic check 1 2 3. Mic check 1 2 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we have quorum present for today's meeting, I would like to call this meeting of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee to order. Just a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during our committee meetings. As we go through our roll call, if I could just ask you to please turn on your microphones and acknowledge that you're present. Councillor Kretsch.
I'm present.
Karen Burke.
Present.
Graham Carroll is absent today. Andrew Douglas.
Present.
Lynn Lundstedt.
Present.
Andy McLaren.
Present.
Stefan Spalnick is absent. Okay. We now move on to our approval of the agenda. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented?
I see Councillor Kretsch and Karen.
Okay. Are there any amendments from the committee members to the agenda before we move forward? Go ahead, Andy.
Yes, I was wondering if I could add to the agenda 265 Mill Street South in Waterdown, the Braeborn House. I would just like to speak about that briefly and to possibly add it to the of interest list.
Through the chair, I believe you just want to add this to the property watch list listing?
Yes.
Okay, so we can do that once we get to that item.
Okay, so I thought I had to add it to the agenda first.
When we get to that item, the chair will ask if there's any properties anyone would like to add, so then you can raise it then.
That's fine. Thank you.
So that's good. As we move to vote, is there anyone opposed to the agenda? Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to our declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations today? I would just declare a disqualifying conflict of interest for item 10.1, item AV111, which is our Heritage Streetscape Revitalization category for the Heritage Awards. Just I have a family member that works for the Architect of Record on a couple of properties within that category. Are there any other declarations of interest today? Seeing none, we'll move on to our approval of minutes from the previous meeting. We have before us 5.1 is our HMHC 25-003 meeting from March 28th, and 5.2 is our HMHC 25-004 for April 4th, 2025. May I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes as presented?
I see Lynn and Andy.
Is there any discussions today in regards to those meeting minutes? Seeing none, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Moving on to our delegations, I just want to note that before we begin our delegations for today, members are just reminded that questions of the delegations are for clarification only and not for debate. So item 6.1, we have Dr. Richard Douglas Chin from the Afro-Canadian Caribbean Association, respecting the importance to Hamilton Dundas history of commemorating Sophia Pooley in the Two-Hat Street Heritage designation. Welcome, Richard. Absolutely. Absolutely. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, I just prepared a very short PowerPoint. I won't be long, but I just wanted to just let you kind of see what the importance is of Sophia Pooley is into this very exciting heritage designation. So if you could run the PowerPoint, that would be great. So that's just, I want you to just go back to the other one, can you? So actually it's okay, because that's the designation there when it was all running the mill in the store. So you just flip to the next one. In terms of Sophia Pooley, she was owned by Samuel Hatt when this was all in effect, when this was going. So can you go to the next one? Yeah, it's okay. Next one. I don't want to go past my 5 minutes. Next. Is it stuck? Yeah, so there, I just put in red there. Gee, I can hardly see it myself. Can I come up to the front so I can see better?
Absolutely.
So there, in terms of that's the information. And so the it's not there anymore. Just maybe is that it at the end there? The Two-Hat Street, you know, like the part that's standing of the mill. That's the mill you're seeing there. That's the mill that you're seeing there. And so I think that's what remains is two hats. We have a little piece over there. And so I wanted to say that Sophia Pooley is so important because she was enslaved by Samuel Happ, the guy who owned this mill, he and his brother. And in terms of just consolidating Canadian history to make it so much more fulsome, I think it's really important to know that as a Black woman, she was part of this history. That place served as a barracks for 7,000 British soldiers, Native allies. I took that from the military history. They don't mention there were Black soldiers involved in that as well. So the importance of Black history is so important to all of Canadian history in general. So you just flip to the next one. That's just a house. That's 2 Hat Street now as it stands. Next one. And so I pulled this up from Parks Canada around the whole city approach because I feel that's the importance of Sophia Pooley, incorporating her into this very exciting designation where, and I put in red some of the things, right? So the top there, the title, it's a framework for the history and commemoration of the historic site system. So crafting big stories, addressing conflict and controversy. I think that's important in terms of the fact that some people feel kind of badly that, you know, we're talking about Samuel Happ, this great initiator of Dundas, but he had slaves. I don't think people need to feel badly. It's part of the history, it's part of the controversy and the conflicts and the things that went on. What's another one? Full range of voices, number 6, so important, I think. We're doing a lot of work around Indigenous voices now. I think Black voices needed to be included in there. Sometimes you see collaboration between Black and Indigenous. So for example, Samuel Happ bought Sophia Pooley from Joseph Brant. So I just think some really interesting historical things there that can be explored and to create a much more fulsome Canadian history than what we have now. And it's always growing. So I'm very excited by it. The power dynamics, number 8, very important in understanding our heritage as a city, Hamilton, Dundas, Ancaster. Next slide, please. That I just wanted to bring up as an example of how this is happening already in terms of, say, McNabb, Dundurn Castle, where there's a lot of attention now being paid to the servants and some of them were indentured working for McNabb. And so that's just an image there. Some of us may have had ancestors who came to Canada, Scottish, Irish, as servants, indentured laborers, servants. And so I think to add Sophia Pooley to this pool would be a wonderful thing because there's a group of people who also were involved and came to Canada as indentured. So next one, please. The presence in Dundas, just so you have a sense of a context, Black people have been here since 1700s. The colored corps that I talked about earlier, who were in 2 Hat Street in the mill, when Hat harbored them there during the War of 1812. 40 of those would have been Black men who fought in the colored corps. Sir Allan McNabb, 120 soldiers. So in the 1837-1838 Upper Canada Rebellion with Mackenzie, against Mackenzie, McNabb being a loyalist, he employed a lot of Black soldiers. So we would want to see, you know, how did Sophia Pooley relate with some of these people with the Black community in Hamilton? These are all really interesting things that have not been looked at yet. How did McNabb relate to these people? And he did. And so I'm going to show you in a second. So if you go to the next slide, that's just one about the Beasley. So Richard Beasley, of course, was on the site of Dundurn Castle, and he had a slave. You can see their devoted slave. I won't read the whole thing, but that's an article that speaks to that, right? That the presence of these people in Hamilton and Dundas. Next one. That's a letter from Sir Allan McNabb to the Black community of Hamilton. And I wanted to raise it because, again, the connection is Samuel had. He housed the soldiers, the loyalist soldiers, in 2 Hat Street. Some of them were Black. This is a letter from McNabb. So this is an example of the ways in which we can draw some of these historical connections. So he wrote to those Black people that he was grateful, you can see it in red there, for your well-tried loyalty and devotion to her person, the Queen, and government in a season of great peril and difficulty. And what he's talking about there, if you go to the top, your faithful adherence to me at the period of our civil troubles. He's talking about the 1838 rebellion. Black people helped him. So how is Sophia Pooley relating to some of those people? I think some really interesting questions. Next one. So that was 1841, by the way, 1842, when he wrote that letter. This one is actually Ancaster, again, to show the presence of Black people sort of in dotted communities all over this city. In red there, this is Alma Dick, who was a descendant of the Hermitage, she's a descendant of George Leith. And so she wrote, if you can read it there, that she's talking about as early as the 30s in Ancaster, somebody with a considerable fortune, Mr. Simmons, came to live in Ancaster. If you go to the second paragraph there, it's like, no, don't turn it yet. See on the second side, gentleman and his wife and friend, Dr. Rolfe, they came from the West Indies. And they had a West Indian home, and they had a Pompey in the house. I'm not sure, is that underlined there? A black Pompey. She talks about the way in which they had their horses in the house in Ancaster and a black Pompey. It's between those two red lines on the right side. So there's a black guy living up in Ancaster in their house. He was a slave, probably. So these are just examples, right, of all the different instances that I think are very cool. So again, next one, we're almost at the end. And this is, I think, a last example I have here. Just had actually, there's a couple more. So this is just from the files. So this was taken, Sophia Pooley, told her story to an abolitionist who recorded it. And this is the text of that interaction, that she was purchased by Samuel Hatz. Oh no, sorry, this is you all. This is the association, right? Writing down what you said was that he likely used the labor of indenture. And I would say he didn't likely, he did. It's a fact that he did. So the next one is the proof of that, where this is the text. I think it's Benjamin Drew who wrote this, 1856. And she spoke to him and said, as you can see, I'm more now than 90. And 12 years old, I was sold to an Englishman in Ancaster for $100. His name was Samuel Hatz. And so that was when Joseph Brant sold her. And so the next one is just another instance of a young child who was something that Samuel had presided over. So, Sophia Pooley was not the only one in Dundas. So this, I'm just going to read it to you. It's in the underline there. And it's so hard to read, but it says, the top red there says, with the consent and approbation of Samuel Hatt, Esquire. And then if you go down to the bottom one, do put, place, and bind Eli Brackenbridge, an orphan Negro child at the age of 5 years, to be an apprentice with him and the said Elijah Secord, until the said Eli Brackenbridge shall come to the age of 21 years. And so there were Black people in Dundas, and Sophia Pooley being one of them. So that's all I want to say about that, just that I think it's so important and so exciting that if we have this designation of 2 Hat Street, it opens up whole vistas of possible research, right? And establishing of a well-rounded Canadian history that we're all a part of. So that's all I'll say. I probably exceeded my 5 minutes, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you for giving a voice to Sophia. Do we have any questions of our delegate or any comments? No? All right. Thank you. We will now move on to item 6.2, which is we have Kathy Calvin from Trinity Lutheran Church, Hamilton, Inc., and Holland Young, Envisage Architects, Inc., respecting item 8.5, PED 25139, a notice of intention to demolish the building located at 39 Wilson Street in Hamilton, being non-designated property listed on the Hamilton Municipal Register in Ward 2. So welcome, Kathy and Holland.
Hello, thank you.
So if you'd like, if you can begin your delegation.
So we're only here to answer any questions if the committee has any questions or concerns.
Okay. Anyone on our committee have any questions of the delegates? No, seeing none. Okay, so we will, I say if there's any further questions during the all right. So there's no questions. So may I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegations?
See Councillor Crutch and Andrew.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed to receiving? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 7 is our items of information. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the items for information? We have before us 7.1 to 7.3.
I see Andy and Councillor Crutch.
And is there any discussion of any of these items? Seeing none, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? That item is carried. Item 8.1 is our PED 25107 is a recommendation to designate 2 Hat Street in Dundas under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in Ward 13. We have Marissa Barris, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, is here to give us a presentation. Welcome.
Great. So hello, my name is Marissa Barris, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, presenting on PED 25107, which is staff's recommendation to designate the property at 2 Hat Street in Dundas. The property at 2 Hat is comprised of a 1-story single detached stone commercial building constructed circa 1804 and has been an important heritage landmark in the community for many decades. 2 Hat Street was first surveyed for potential heritage interest by the local Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee in the 1970s and again in 1994. In 2004, the Dundas Community Heritage Advisory Panel requested the designation of the property, which was not completed, although it was added to the City of Hamilton's list of buildings and landscapes of concern from 2006 to 2009 and was awarded the HMHC Heritage Property Conservation Award in 2008. In 2013, municipal law enforcement received a complaint that the property had been vacated and it was added to the vacant building registry. In 2017, the HMHC requested that 2 Hat be reviewed for designation, which City Council approved, adding the property to the designation work plan. In 2021, a concerned private citizen posted signs around Dundas bringing attention to the town's history with slavery, including signs on 2 Hat Street, which is pictured here. In 2022, as a result of Bill 23's changes to the Ontario Heritage Act, it was added to staff's high priority designation work plan. And in 2023, the Inventory and Research Working Group passed a motion in support of the designation, and staff met with a community member who expressed concerns about the property's connections with the history of slavery in Dundas. As a result of this meeting, staff sought additional feedback from the Afro-Caribbean Canadian Association over 2 meetings, with additional email communication offering opportunities to comment on the amended evaluation report. The new report, which is now Appendix C to PED 25107, was then circulated to the Dundas Museum and Archives for comment. The revised heritage evaluation produced found that the property meets 6 of the 9 criteria for designation outlined in Ontario Regulation 906, which I'll now go into more detail on. Having been built circa 1804, the property meets 1 physical and design criteria as a rare, unique, and early example of pre-Confederation architecture in Upper Canada as one of the oldest buildings in Dundas and the only surviving structure from the original New Dundas Mills complex. It's also an early example of the use of dolostone from the Niagara Escarpment in the construction of Dundas buildings. The property meets 2 historical associative criteria, having associations with and the potential to yield information that contributes to an understanding of the Hat family, Black communities, the New Dundas Mills, the founding of the town of Dundas, and the history of slavery in Ontario. The New Dundas Mills first began as a sawmill in 1799, with buildings constructed by Jonathan Morden and Edward Peer before being purchased, along with milling rights and water access, by Richard Hat, his brother Samuel Hat, and fellow settler Manuel Overfield in 1804. The Hat brothers, Samuel and Richard, were wealthy Englishmen who immigrated from 1796 to 98, motivated by capitalist and industrial opportunities in Canada. Far from being woodsmen, the Hats quickly built business networks in Niagara before moving to the head of the lake and brought with them at least 6 indentured servants. Unfortunately, with historic documentation being biased towards wealthy, elite, literate landowner classes, we do not know the exact histories of these 6 people whose labor sustained operations and produced the financial success of the early Hat estate. We know, however, that in addition to these 6 indentured servants they brought, Samuel Hat was also guilty of at the very least enslaving Sophia Berthan Pooley and supporting the indenture of an orphaned Black child named Eli Brackenridge. We know a fair amount about Sophia thanks to an 1856 interview recorded by a Quaker abolitionist in which she provided a rare first-hand account of her life as an enslaved person in Ontario. Born circa 1775 to 78 into slavery in New York, Sophia was kidnapped as a child by 2 men who would eventually settle in Canada as late Loyalists and sold to the notable Mohawk political and military figure Dayan Naga, also called Joseph Brant. Sophia recounted her time with Joseph with positive remarks, having been raised alongside some of his children in the Dundas area. However, Brant's third wife, Catherine, who was the daughter of a plantation slave owner in the United States, was cruel to Sophia, assaulting her with a knife and hatchet, permanently scarring her face. Sophia recalled that Joseph disavowed Catherine's behavior. During the dozen or so years she spent enslaved by Brant in the Dundas area as a youth, Sophia became fluent in Mohawk and knowledgeable in Mohawk cultural and political practices and the local Dundas landscape. Sophia's path likely crossed that of the Hats sometime between 1798 and 99 when the brothers opened a grist mill in Ancaster called the Red Mill. Their operations at the Red Mill did not initially grow like they hoped it would, partly due to Jean-Baptiste Rousseau's existing monopoly in the area. Rousseau was a fluent Mohawk speaker and a good friend of Joseph Brant's. In the head of the lake at this time, establishing positive relations with Brant and Mohawk people was critical to the success of any settler enterprise. Seeing this, Sophia's existing knowledge of the area, the Mohawk language, and understanding that business relationships at the time were rooted in part through interpersonal relationships, we can infer that Samuel Hatt's purchase of Sophia for $100, circa 1798 to 99, was likely part of a calculated business agreement between both Hatts and Brant in an effort to try to grow their enterprises and business relations. Seeing that, Sophia's exchange was representative of the ways in which economic networks at the time were built in part on the trade of captive people, whether through slavery or indenture. It's under these conditions that in 1804, while Sophia was still enslaved by Samuel Hatt, that the brothers purchased the Dundas Mills and expanded the complex to include 2 Hatt Street as a potashery. In this context, while Samuel Hatt is the only brother known to have been an active slaver, Richard was also at the very least complicit in enabling the transaction and continued captivity of Sophia, benefiting from her skills, knowledge, and prior relationship with Joseph Brant in the expansion of the new Dundas Mills business. Sophia remained enslaved by Samuel Hatt for approximately 7 years until sometime likely prior to 1807, after which she became a free person. We do not know the exact terms under which she gained her freedom, but she eventually found her way to Queen's Bush near Waterloo, where she lived until she passed away circa 1860. In Dundas, the new Dundas Mills, under the leadership of Richard Hatt, had an irrevocable impact on the built form of Dundas by attracting settlement away from the originally laid town plot and closer towards the industrial complex. Beyond its role as part of a broader complex, 2 Hatt Street also served as the town's very first informal post office. Samuel stayed in business with his brother well after he sold his share in 1807, meaning that in the absence of direct records, Sophia's influence on the new Dundas Mills, which is embodied by 2 Hatt Street, can be traced in part by the Hatts' accumulation of wealth and influence resulting from the manual labor of those people who operated the mills, offered knowledge on local geography, and translated discussions with Mohawk speakers for them. Over time, 2 Hatt Street served many functions, being converted into a blacksmith shop in 1818, continuing as such until 1943 when it was converted into a residence. In 1961, it was sold and converted into the Folks House of Lights and Shades, and it remained a commercial building until it was declared vacant in 2013. The property meets all 3 contextual criteria, defining the historic character of the area, considered to be a local landmark, its unique appearance and location at the terminus of Hatt Street and adjacency to Main Street grant it a high degree of visibility. As the last remaining building of the new Dundas Mills complex, 2 Hatt Street is a relic of the area's historic industrial past, and the property's proximity to the Dundas Town Hall speaks to its status as Dundas's historic governing and administrative center. Its continued presence also speaks to its relationship with early local urban development and historic economic networks which exploited the labor of indentured and enslaved people that wealthy land prospectors like the Hatts exploited to assert and expand their influence. You can see here a short summary of the criteria for your reference, with a full version of the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value and Interest available in Appendix B of the staff report. And here is a summary list of the heritage features identified to be included in the designation. The full list can be found again in Appendix B of the staff report. And finally, here is a summary of staff's recommendation, which can be found in Report PED 25107. And I would like to thank the Afro-Caribbean Canadian Association, the Dundas Museum and Archives, Hamilton Heritage Resource Management and Indigenous Relations staff, and those community members who were consulted in the assessment of this property for their help and contributions in making this report possible. Questions?
Thank you so much, Marissa. That was a great presentation. Before we do go to questions, I have a mover and a seconder to put forward the report on the floor to allow for questions on both the presentation and the report.
I see Councillor Crutch and Andrew.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Crutch?
Yeah, no questions. Everything was really thoroughly explained, and I appreciate all the extra documentation it takes for taking the time to come today, delegate, and speak to this important part of our history. I think it's important to acknowledge these things. I spoke with Ward 13 councillor who couldn't be here today. I'm the representative for council on the Heritage Committee, so just wanted me to pass that along. Also his thanks for making sure that this gets designated, making sure that we understand the history, making sure it's in context, and I'll be sharing a lot of the remarks from today as part of what I do to share heritage around the city in the coming weeks. And so thank you very much for this. I think it's important for us to acknowledge and be aware and to learn from some of the things. I think it's also important that you pointed out that small, I think what I consider the likely versus the actual. These things matter. Language matters. How we talk about this matters. And so thanks for taking that time to sort of do that extra work and let people know, what's going on here, what documentation we have, and bringing that to light.
Matt, the delegate, would just like to make a comment, if that's okay. Do you need approval from? Go ahead, Richard.
Sorry, you just need to
I'm just learning my way. Thank you for being so patient. But no, just to piggyback on what you were saying, Councillor, I think language is so important. And as I was listening to you talk, we went over all this, and I thought, you said something about Hat was guilty of having a slave. And when you were saying that, I thought we need to remove that language, because I think the buy-in is greater if we don't have, and it might have been us that put it in there, I can't remember who put that word in, but in terms of language, I think it's so important to kind of reserve the judgment about it, because then I think when we just present the history, that's all we need to do. And I think it's so much more effective. So in terms of heritage, I think that's so important. And it's all about language, right? Yeah. And the buy-in will be greater. Definitely. If you take out words like that, judgment words, bigger buy-in. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. So if I put that in there, I think we should take it out. No, I can't remember how it got in there.
Do we have any other questions or comments? So this is for both the presentation and the report. Was there any questions in regards to the report that was attached? Seeing none, we will, if there's no other questions, we'll.
Sorry.
Oh.
This is my first time, so I'm sure it's to protocol to like.
Oh.
No, sorry. Only committee members can speak or. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Just through the chair, Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead. Just if there are folks in attendance today who didn't request to delegate and aren't able to speak, if you do have any perspectives you'd like to share, this report will then proceed to Planning Committee. So you are able to provide delegation, whether written or request to speak if you'd like to do it at that time.
All right. So we'll now move to receive the presentation and approve the recommendations in the report that are before us. As we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Thank you, everyone. We now move on to item 8.2, PAD 25071, recommendation to designate 252 Caroline Street South in Hamilton, which is Central Presbyterian Church under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Ward 2. So we have Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planner, is here to give us a presentation. Welcome, Scott.
All right, good afternoon. Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planner, and this is the recommendation to designate 252 Caroline Street South, known as the Central Presbyterian Church. This thing wants to cooperate. There we go. This property is located at the southwestern corner of the intersection of Caroline Street South and Charlton Avenue West in the historic Durand neighborhood in the city of Hamilton. It was first surveyed for potential heritage interest in the 1970s by the Hamilton LACAC as part of their inventory of the Durand neighborhood. In 1991, the Ontario Heritage Trust erected a plaque on the property to commemorate its history. In 2016, it was surveyed as part of the Durand Neighborhood Built Heritage Inventory Project. And the following year, in May of 2017, it was listed on the Municipal Heritage Register and added to staff's designation work plan. In March of 2023, it was added to the high priority list at Council's direction for designation by January of 2025. Staff recommend designation for this property as it meets 8 of the 9 criteria laid out under Ontario Regulation 9-06. It has a great deal of design and physical value. This one-story brick church, constructed in 1908, is a representative example of a place of worship influenced by both the Beaux Arts and the Colonial Revival styles of architecture. And it is also an early example of the Colonial Revival style in any sort of building in Ontario. The features typical of the Beaux Arts style include its monumental size and scale, its symmetrical front elevation, and the eclectic use of classical elements, including the entablature, the portico with segmented pediment, and the round-headed window openings. The features typical of the Colonial Revival style include its tower and spire, which are inspired by historical examples, including St. Martin's in the Field in London, England, and by colonial New England meeting houses. As well, the use of modern materials like steel and artificial stone, and the greater level of ornamentation compared to its historic prototypes also mark it as an example of the Colonial Revival. This property has a great deal of, it displays a high degree of craftsmanship through the steeple, including its brick tower with stone accents, the open belfry with open-headed stone arches, the lantern with stone oculus openings, and the octagonal brick spire that tops the lantern. Other elements of the property which display a high degree of craftsmanship include its entablature with projecting cornice, modillions, and dentils, the round-headed window openings with brick voussoirs and stone keystones and endstones, the oculus windows with their own brick voussoirs and stone keystones, the main entrance at the projecting base of the steeple tower, the main entrance portico with its segmental pediment and its stone door surround with floral motif and carved stone head in classical style. A lot of things here, I'm losing my place. The entrances flanking the main entrance as well with their own oculus windows, and the projecting rounded side entrances with their half-dome roofs and molded cornices with stone door surrounds with triangular pediments. This property has a great deal of historical and associative value. It is directly associated with the long-standing Central Presbyterian Church. Formed in 1841, the congregation, now known as Central Presbyterian, first met in a small wooden schoolhouse at the corner of Jackson Street East and James Street South. Initially a very small group, this congregation grew rapidly through the 1840s and 1850s, which required them to continually move locations as they continued to grow. By 1858, they had settled on what they hoped to be a permanent location at the corner of Jackson Street West and McNabb Street South, which is now the site of the Superior Court of Justice. The congregation constructed a large Gothic Revival church on that site, and this was home to the congregation until 1906, when faulty overhead electrical wires set fire to the building. Unfortunately, it was completely destroyed. The congregation decided to rebuild, but not in the same location. Instead, they planned to move a little outside the downtown core to a location southwest of their former church in the Durand neighborhood. This property has the potential to yield information that contributes to an understanding of Hamilton's Presbyterian community. This church, with a long-standing presence in the local community, can yield information that contributes to an understanding of the Presbyterian Church in Hamilton. And of course, this property also demonstrates the work of famed Canadian architect John McIntosh Lyle, as shown here. Lyle, born in Belfast, Ireland, came to Canada with his family at the age of 6. His father, the Reverend Samuel Lyle, was minister of Central Presbyterian between 1878 and 1910. Lyle was educated in Hamilton before receiving training at Yale and then at the famed École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France. Once he returned from France, Lyle worked initially in New York for several architectural firms before returning to Canada in 1906 to set up his own architectural practice. It was shortly after returning to Canada that he began his design work for Central Presbyterian. An advocate for the Beaux Arts style, Lyle was also a proponent of the idea of a national style of architecture, one that would be uniquely Canadian through the incorporation of natural and Indigenous motifs. He designed prominent structures throughout Canada. Here are a few examples. In Toronto, the Royal Alexandria Theatre and Union Station. In Halifax, the Bank of Nova Scotia building, shown on the left. And in Kingston, the Memorial Arch at the Royal Military College. Although the subject property represents one of Lyle's earliest works, it is not his only work in Hamilton. Others include Gateside on Aberdeen Avenue, Windstay Estate in Ancaster, the York Street High Level Bridge, of course, and well known to generations of Eastenders, the Gage Park Fountain. This property also has a great deal of contextual value. It is important in defining the historic character of the Durand neighborhood. Durand, one of Hamilton's oldest residential neighborhoods, was home to many of Hamilton's wealthy through the 19th and early 20th centuries. These residents built the large and architecturally impressive homes that define Durand today, and the subject property, being a large and impressive church built in what was once a novel architectural style, is an important part of this historic character. This property, being sited on its original location in a sympathetic streetscape, is both visually and historically linked to its surroundings. And of course, due to its size, height, prominent corner lot location, and architectural style, this well-known and visually distinctive structure is considered to be a local landmark. The 8 foregoing criteria are summarized here in this Statement of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. The full version of this statement is in Appendix B of the attached report 25071. And also in that appendix is the full version of this description of heritage attributes, which will inform the writing of a designation bylaw. The summary of those attributes, the elevations and roofline of the one-story brick 1908 place of worship, including its T-shaped plan, its red brick facade, its brick steeple with belfry, lantern, and octagonal spire, its flat roof with brick parapet and stone entablature, its symmetrical front facade with main entrance, portico, and flanking entrances with oculus windows, its round-headed windows with elaborate stained glass and molded cornices, and its projecting side entrances with half-dome roofs and molded cornices. The original first story of the attached 1908 Sunday school building, although considered to be of cultural heritage value or interest, is not included in the list of heritage attributes that will form part of this designated bylaw. And of course, the key attributes of the contextual value of this property are its location at the corner of Caroline Street South and Charlton Avenue West, and the highly visible brick steeple. Staff recommend that the city clerk be directed to give notice of council's intention to designate this property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And of course, we open the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. Before we go to questions, can I have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor to allow for questions on the report and the presentation?
I see Karen and Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to questions or comments. Not seeing anybody. Another great presentation. Thank you, Scott. So if there are no questions, then we will move on to the vote. So the vote is to receive the presentation and approve the recommendations that are before us in the report. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Thank you, everyone. We now move on to item 8.3, which is PED 25102, recommendation to designate 54 King Street East in Hamilton, the former Bank of Nova Scotia, under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Ward 2. Marissa Barris, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, is here to give us a presentation.
Hello again. It's me, Marissa Barris, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, presenting on PED 25102, staff's recommendation to designate the property at 54 King Street East, Hamilton. Okay, comprised of a three-story Beaux-Arts commercial building constructed in 1914, known as the former Bank of Nova Scotia. The property was first surveyed for potential heritage interest in the 1980s by the former Local Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee, and in 2013, it was added to the Municipal Heritage Register, and a preliminary evaluation was prepared the following year. In 2022, the property was identified as a high priority for review for designation. In July 2023, the owner was notified of their property's new status as a priority, and new research and evaluation of the property began in fall of 2024. As a part of this new research, city staff conducted consultation with members of 2S LGBTQ+ communities associated with the property's recent history and circulated a draft to them in January 2025. In February 2025, staff forwarded the finalized heritage evaluation to the property owner and had further discussions with them about designation in person and by phone. Here you can see a summary of the staff evaluation, which determined that the property meets 8 of the 9 criteria for designation, which I'll now go into more detail on. 54 King has physical value as a representative example of a commercial bank building designed in the Beaux-Arts Classicism architectural style. The 3-story high building was constructed with brick, steel, and concrete, and features a symmetrical and imposing facade faced with Ohio Canyon cut stone with an even coarse finish. 54 King is also the only known surviving example of a building with a facade made of Ohio Canyon sandstone in Hamilton, which is an expensive material imported that was used in Hamilton as early as the 1870s, primarily for detailing and embellishments. Design features typical of the Beaux-Arts Classicism architectural style and which show a high degree of artistic ability include the balustrade and tablature with a dentelated course, a plain frieze and a molded cornice, large stone pilasters with Doric capitals and molded bases, presence of tall metal framed windows with decorative grillwork in the upper square panes, which span the 2nd and 3rd stories, and a recessed central entrance with a stone surround. While much of the building's exterior features are intact, some modifications have been completed, including the replacement of the tall 2nd and 3rd story metal framed windows with new windows and window casings, which replicate the style of the original windows, and the modification of the 1st story windows in a design which is sympathetic to the original intent of the building. Sometime after the 1980s, 2 stone lions were added as decoration in front of the 1st story window bays, flanking either side of the French entrance, which have become notable features of the building. In the year 2000, renovations were completed to add a rear 1st-story extension to the building, atop which sits a 2nd-story patio, which are not considered to be of heritage value. The property meets all 3 historical associative criteria. Built in 1914, the former Bank of Nova Scotia building replaced an earlier row building known as the Weiner Building. In the early 1900s, the Bank of Nova Scotia was expanding, with its first branch in Hamilton opening in 1902. Their continued growth led to the purchase of a lot in Gore Park, around which were many other financial and banking institutions at the time. The bank was designed by a nationally prominent firm that designed a number of Bank of Nova Scotia buildings called Bond & Smith Architects, made up of a partnership between Charles Herbert Acton Bond and Sanford Fleming Smith. During their 17-year partnership, Bond & Smith designed many notable buildings across southern Ontario and in the Maritime provinces, only 2 of which are known to have been built in Hamilton, that is 54 King, and the nearby McKay Building, also located in Gore Park at 66 King Street East, which you can see here on this slide. By the mid-1970s, the property transitioned from an office into a restaurant, eventually being converted into an adult entertainment business in 1980, and in 1983, a trendy nightclub called Club 54. From the 1970s to the early 1990s, these businesses played a role in transforming the reputation from its previous life in white-collar business into one of gathering and nightlife. In 1993, the Embassy, a 2S LGBTQ+ friendly nightclub, opened and would go on to become a cornerstone of the 2S LGBTQ+ landscape in Hamilton until its closure in 2018. Over 2 decades, the Embassy persisted in a fluctuating landscape that saw many other 2S LGBTQ+ places of gathering and community open and close, and its persistence helped it build a reputation as a central feature of Hamilton's 2S LGBTQ+ landscape. It was also the site of important events in local 2S LGBTQ+ history. As an openly 2S space, 54 King was also a target for homophobia and was the location of a high-profile hate crime in 2007 where 3 gay men were attacked after leaving the club, sparking protest in the community and resulting in a march to 54 King Street East in solidarity. The closure of the embassy in 2018 had a notable impact on Hamilton's 2S communities, which has historically had few long-standing spaces. In 2023, the building reopened as a nightclub, but is no longer a 2S institution. 54 King meets all 3 contextual criteria. It's important in defining the historic character of the area around Gore Park in downtown Hamilton as part of a commercial streetscape on the south side of King Street East with a consistent street wall spanning between James and Wellington Street. It is also visually, physically, and historically linked to its surroundings as one of the remaining historic buildings in the King Street East block between Houston and John Streets. The property is additionally connected to a landscape of banking and financial institutions as one of only 2 remaining historic banking buildings in Hamilton downtown core, although the surrounding area is still defined by financial institutions, including 12 King Street East, which is now Scotiabank, which was occupied by banking buildings as early as 1848, and 40 to 44 King Street East, which historically was home to the Gore Bank and is currently home to a 1977 building constructed as a bank. The property is considered to be a landmark. Its monumental facade, combined with its highly trafficked location, make it an important and well-recognized feature of the Gore Park landscape, and have also helped it become a popular location for filming in movies and television. The property is also considered to be a 2S landmark. You can see a short summary of the criteria here for your reference, and a full version of the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value Interest is available in Appendix B of the staff report. And this here is a summary list of the heritage features identified to be included in the designation, with a full list including reference to the outstanding details of the property's design being available in Appendix B of the staff report. And finally, here is a summary of staff's recommendation, which can be found in PED 25102. I would also like to quickly thank those community members we consulted with in the research for this report, who provided important feedback on the evaluation of the property and played a key role in its drafting. Questions?
Thank you, Marissa. That was fantastic. Do we have any, well, actually, before we go to questions, can I have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor so that we can ask questions on both the presentation and the report?
I see Councillor Crutch and Lynn.
Okay. And do we have any questions or comments? Councillor?
Yeah, a couple. I'm not a very dancey kind of person, but I've been to the embassy, like many other queer and trans folks in the city. And so sad to lose that venue, but thank you for taking the time to really isolate and talk about why it's important for us to have that history. My honest question is, how many times have we done that in the city where we've had a heritage landmark that we're thinking about designating, or having conversations here and talked about communities related to us LGBTQI+ people? So do we do that often? Is this the first time we've ever really considered that as part of the heritage landscape? I haven't been here forever, so I don't know.
Through the chair, Ken Coit, Director of Heritage and Urban Design. I was going to speak to this a little later, but you've had 2 today that are very much associated with the important social history in a city. Of course, buildings have long histories, and the often important parts are how they're used and by different people, and what they mean to different communities. And Steve, the director, GM Robichaud, pointed this out to us as well, that this is the first time he's seen this level of work, and that's lent itself to these 2 designations. So we'll probably be doing this going forward, and obviously it's an important part, but it is the story of each building that we're trying to find and tell and document.
And do we know, if there's ever been another designation that's really emphasized the 2S LGBTQI+ history of something? I don't think downtown, but I mean period in Hamilton. Have we ever done that before?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, not that I'm aware of in terms of our existing designations. I mean, there are some other landmarks that have had some heritage status, but not designation, and not specifically speaking to that associative value within the recognition of it, but so this is the first that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think it's worth recognizing that. I mean, like, there aren't that many places for queer and trans folks to go in our city. So the fact that some existed and that it had a significant impact on the cultural and social history of our city is important to mark. So thank you for that.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Okay, so we'll now move on to our vote. So we're voting to receive the presentation and approve the recommendations in the report. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to item 8.4 is PED 25127, the notice of intention to demolish the building located at 96 John Street South in Hamilton, being a non-designated property listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, Ward 2. We have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor.
See Councillor Crutch and Andrew.
Okay. Are there any questions of the committee? Any comments? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 8.5, PED 25139 is the notice of intention to demolish the building located at 39 Wilson Street in Hamilton, being a non-designated property listed on the Hamilton Municipal Register in Ward 2. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor?
See Councillor Crutch and Andy.
Okay. As we move forward on this one, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Okay. Before we move on to our next item, I want to thank staff for the incredible amount of work and time and effort that's gone into those designations and those reports. That's amazing. So thank you so much for that. We're now going to move on to our notice of motions, and I turn the chair over.
Thank you very much. So our next item is 10.1, Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Heritage Recognition Award nominees 2024-2025. May I please have a mover and seconder to suspend the rules of order to introduce this motion as it is time sensitive?
I see Karen as the mover and Councillor Crutch as the seconder.
Is there anyone opposed? Then that item is carried with one abstention. Karen, can you please introduce your motion and your seconder?
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to introduce this motion moved by myself and seconded by Lynn Lundstedt on the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee's Heritage Recognition Awards 2024-2025. Whereas the mandate of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee includes advising city staff and council on programs and activities to increase public awareness and knowledge of heritage conservation issues, and to participate in heritage events and activities such as the annual Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Heritage Recognition Awards. And whereas the Heritage Education and Communication Working Group of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee has reviewed the nominations for this year's recognition awards and have coordinated the proposed awards event date and location. Therefore, it be resolved that the list of award nominations for the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee's Heritage Recognition Awards be approved, subject to confirmation by the owner that the property is in good standing with the City of Hamilton. And you have before you the full list of properties provided in the meeting materials.
Are there any questions from the committee? If not, we will. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I know it wasn't in the motion, so I thought I would just ask if you could just say it out loud when the date of the actual award ceremony would be.
Thursday, June 26th.
That date is Thursday, June 26th.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then we will vote on the motion. Is there anyone opposed? Then that item is carried with one abstention. Next up is item 10.2, Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association Volunteer Recognition. May I please have a mover and seconder to suspend the rules of order to introduce this motion as it is time sensitive?
I see Alyssa and Karen as the mover and seconder.
Is there anyone opposed? Then that item is carried. Alyssa, please introduce your motion and your seconder.
Through the chair, so therefore it be resolved that the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee submit a volunteer recognition nomination to the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association for Janice Brown to recognize her volunteer efforts. And that was seconded by Karen.
Are there any questions for the committee? If not, we'll vote on that motion. Is there any opposed? Then that item is carried, and I shall turn it back over to Alyssa, our chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We now move on to item 11, which is our general information and other business. Item 11.1 is our verbal update respecting the status of 86 Homewood Avenue. I'd like to call upon Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead, to provide an update.
Thanks so much to the chair. So as members might recall, there was a question raised in terms of the potential state of the congregation at 86 Homewood Avenue and a discussion of maybe if there's some change happening in terms of merging or potentially selling. And the committee had asked staff to reach out to the congregation to just indicate that there was heritage interest in the property and to see what the status of things might be. Staff were able to get in touch with the congregation. There are no plans in terms of sale or merger. Staff did have a nice back and forth via email and had indicated that obviously this is an important landmark within the community, does have heritage value or interest, and we're open to having any conversations they might want to have about potential designation. And that line of communication is open. But yes, no immediate threat or concern as per the members' previous questions were identified through those conversations.
That's great. Thank you, Alyssa. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the update?
I see Andrew and Karen.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed to receiving? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 11.2 is our Heritage Buildings and Landscape Watch List. As we move forward, is there any additions to the list? Andy, you had one property that you'd like to add, if you want to mention that right now.
Thanks, Alyssa. To the chair, just want to briefly speak about the Brayborn House, which is located in Waterdown, 265 Mill Street South. The property, or the house was built in 1846, and it was sold in 2015. I was fortunate enough to go to an estate auction at the time when the owner had passed away. The property has changed ownership several times. The current owner now is the Montessori School. And the property has been designated. City staff has been doing a tremendous amount of work to get the property designated, as well as the Montessori School is 100%, which is the current owner, is 100% behind the designation. The concern, I drive by the property every day. It is not a fenced off property, and it's on 5 acres. The property is 5 acres, and there's concern about the possible vandalism on it. I know that city staff has indicated that there is some kind of surveillance, not 24 hours or 24/7. But I had noticed that there had been some graffiti that was sprayed on the boarded up windows. However, maybe I'll let city staff elaborate on this, but there's been a fair bit of movement on the current owner because they want to restore the building, which is fantastic, and move the Montessori School there. But I was wondering if it'd be possible to put this address on the watch list just until progression has happened with getting work done on the property, and it can be fenced off and protected a little bit better. If I could ask city staff to elaborate, please. Thank you.
Thanks, through the chair. So yes, this property is in a state of transition. It has been vacant for a number of years. We just recently went through the process of designating it, and that designation bylaw is now registered on title. And our heritage staff have been working closely with municipal law enforcement staff in terms of proactive monitoring of the vacant building. as it's awaiting redevelopment. And staff have now received a formal consultation for site plan to implement the development on site for the Montessori school. So we're glad to see that that's in and moving forward. So as per the member's request, this is in the state of transition, so it could be reasonable to add it to your yellow watch list in terms of its state as we're waiting for redevelopment to take place.
Excellent. Thanks, Alyssa. That's all I have. Thank you.
So Andy, you're happy with the yellow status?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
And would you be the volunteer that would be watching that property?
Yes. Okay. I can drive by it every day.
Okay. Matt, is there any other information that you need? Okay. So do we have a seconder for that? No? Okay. And as we move to vote on adding this to the list, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item will be carried. Do we have any other property additions to the list or any properties that a member would like to have removed from the list? Okay. Seeing none, are there any property updates that anyone would like to give? Seeing none today, may I have a mover and a seconder to, go ahead.
Through the chair, staff just wanted to note that in terms of the recommendation to designate, so this is for item 30, 200 Main Street East for First Pilgrim United Church. That had passed through this committee, gone to planning committee, and was on its way to council. Staff had been working with the congregation on the process for recommending designation and been having dialogue throughout the process. They did indicate some concern and had provided a delegation to council for their consideration, which led to it being referred back to planning committee to allow them to delegate to the committee for their consideration before finalizing a recommendation to designate. So that's just being coordinated right now. I just wanted to let the committee know that update on the status of that recommendation.
Right. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the heritage property updates?
I see Andy and Lynn.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Alyssa, was there any further update that you had other than, no? Okay. Ken, did you?
Yeah, through the chair, I'd like the opportunity just to provide a quick some staff comment. Thank you very much. Ken Coit, Director of Heritage and Urban Design. Kind of speaking on behalf of the General Manager of the department, who's been along the ride for many of these designations and has been involved in this process for many years, as many of you around the table. Just to point out, this is our 33rd designation report since January 1st, 2023, which is an amazing amount of work. And we really just wanted to point out the kind of change in the associative value and the amount of work that has gone into that, and the working with the community and the collective working with our friends in tourism and culture. So I wanted to just say a special thank you to Alyssa and the Heritage staff and Marissa and Meg, who've been involved in working this through. Special thank you to Tourism and Culture, Dr. Douglas Chin, the Afro-Canadian Caribbean Association, and of course those members of the 2S LGBTQ+ that helped in putting this together. It's great to see it's a community effort. And as I noted before in response to the councillor's question, it's great that we're getting the team together to be able to do the designations to get them to this level and contribute to the story of the building and the story of the city and the city's communities through time. So I wanted to thank everybody and just make sure we recognize that today. Good work.
Thank you, Ken. That's, I think, echoed on this side of the table as well from the membership perspective, just the incredible amount of work that's taken place in the last very short period of time. So that's excellent. Alyssa?
Through the chair, just wanted to also note that there's a new posting on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. Staff had circulated it to the members for their information. It was just posted on April 17th, related to proposed amendments to the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff will be preparing a report for this committee's information for the next meeting, but the comment period actually closes May 17th before your next meeting. So just wanted to make sure you were aware of that and had an opportunity to take a look and provide any feedback you might have.
Alyssa, is that something that should go to policy and design as for comment at all, or?
Through the chair, in terms of the reality of the commenting period, I'm not sure it would actually allow for a recommendation to make it up through this committee to be formally submitted, but it could be a point of conversation at the next regularly scheduled policy and design in terms of just the members being able to speak to that and any feedback you might want to give individually.
Is there any other further updates? I thought I saw a hand down the table.
Just wanted to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead, Lynn.
Could I have an update on the Troy Women's Institute building? I know that the councillor had put the recommendation through the heritage sub-permit, which was passed, but I don't know what's happened after that.
Yeah, through the chair. So staff, the city has received a request to repeal the designation bylaw. As staff had provided an update at the last meeting, we had been working with the local councillor to look at opportunities for potentially extending existing heritage grant programs to help facilitate repair of the school, former school, rather than having to get to a point of having to address a repeal request. So those conversations are ongoing. In the meantime, as per the legislative process, we had gone to Planning Committee and Council to get direction because we had to give formal notice of that objection or that request to repeal having been received. And there's a legislative 30-day objection period before we then bring a report to you folks, to this committee that considers that request to repeal, any objections from the broader community that we might receive in response to that request to repeal, and then have a recommendation that would go up with your advice to Planning Committee and Council for a decision.
Are there any other items of business? If not, we'll move for adjournment. So there being no further business, the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee is now adjourned at 1:06. Thank you, everyone, and we'll have our next meeting in May. Thanks.